And little more than 3 months after the violent incidents of August 23rd, the military court in San Antonio announced the verdicts. 54 of the 63 soldiers were found guilty of all charges. 4 were declared guilty of willfully disobeying orders by leaving camp. 41 were sentenced to confinement at hard labor for the term of their natural lives. 5 were acquitted. 13 men were found responsible for masterminding the mutiny or leading the march. They were sentenced to be hanged. One of them was Charles Baltimore, whose arrest sparked the mutiny. Also sentenced to be executed, Jesse Moore and T.C. Hawkins.
You would think that somebody somewhere up the line would say, hey, we need to stop. We need to take another look at this. We need to, examine this again. But nobody did.
The mass execution took place in secret at dawn on December 11th by the banks of Salado Creek. The men had not been told of their impending execution until that very morning.
There was no press coverage. The Army thought it would be a spectacle if they had the news media there, so they circulated a rumor that the execution was going to be carried out at Leon Springs, which is about 20 miles away. And the reporters headed for Leon Springs, so none of them were present during the execution.
Despite great security from officers expecting the worst, the men surrendered to their fate peacefully and with dignity as they awaited their death. No one wept, and none of the men begged for mercy. Over 200 soldiers and law enforcement officers were assembled to prevent any trouble at the execution. After the men mounted the platform, a black minister and 2 white chaplains led a short prayer. The officer in charge said attention, and the men began singing a hymn. Their final words were a farewell to their guards, saying, "Goodbye, boys of Company C." As the men stood at attention looking straight ahead, the officer brought his raised arms down. The trap doors swung open, and the men dropped 9 feet, meeting death and the words of a witness with neither bravado or fear. The men were buried in unmarked graves along Salado Creek, where they remained until 1937, when the Army needed the area for training purposes.
And one of the persons investigating the situation determined that the soldiers had not been dishonorably discharged before they were hanged, as would have been appropriate. So they were authorized burial in the National Cemetery.
Their fate was sealed in part because of their outrage over segregation in the city of Houston. Ironically, in death, these black soldiers became the first to integrate Fort Sam Houston Cemetery. For many, many years, the mothers and fathers of the soldiers had no idea exactly where their sons were buried. It was 17 years before Angela Holder's family got answers.
It made the family very sad. Like I said before, it was this big question mark. It was a big mystery. Where was Jesse? What really happened to him?
For others, the burden was almost too much to bear.
It tore my grandfather apart. He suffered greatly on that because he was very close to his sons. And according to my aunt, what she said was that my grandfather really never recovered from the tragedy.
Even in death, T.C. Hawkins declared his innocence. This letter arrived at his parents' home after he was hanged.
Dear Mother and Father, when this letter reaches you, I will be beyond the veil of sorrow. I will be in heaven with the angels. Mother, don't worry over your son, because
it is heaven's gain. Look not upon my body as one that must fill a watery grave, but one that is asleep in Jesus. I fear not death. I am sentenced to be hanged for the trouble that happened in Houston, Texas, although I am not guilty of the crime that I am accused of. But Mother, it is God's will that I go now, and in this way. And Mother, I'm gonna look for you and the family. If possible, I will meet you at the river. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. I will give thee rest. Bless his holy name.